Now, David Sachs, we all know who he is, the crypto and AI czar, also one of the original PayPal founders. He, along with Elon Musk, and another guy by the name of Peter Thiel, all of those guys are in very unique positions. And isn't it interesting that all three of those guys are confidants to the president of the United States?
It's extremely interesting.
Does the vector not really, it's kind of out in the open right now. Does the vector not point to something here? And I want to get your theory on where Thiel is going with Palantir.
Yep. So not just Palantir, what he's been trying to enable for money for longer than I've been alive. Peter Thiel happens to be, in my opinion, the greatest tech investor of all time. Not only does he have a remarkable ability to spot a technology and its future impact, but actually pick and enable the winners in it. Now, to talk about David Sachs very quickly, David Sachs was the COO at PayPal, brought in specifically by Thiel. I remember listening to a podcast that Sachs gave, and he couldn't have bigged Thiel up enough. He very much put him as one of the smartest individuals he's ever came across. So there's a direct link between Peter Thiel and David Sachs. There's perhaps a more important link between Thiel and his ability to understand money, revolutionize it with PayPal, which originally started out as Confinity with Max Levchin. Yeah. The story behind that very quickly, because it is interesting, was that Max was looking for somewhere to actually cool off, and he stumbled into a Stanford lecture that Thiel was giving. It's a crazy story, right? But he approached him with this idea that subsequently later became PayPal, and that was to enable digital money via Palm pages. So Palm pages were handheld devices, and Thiel obviously thought, well, I see this as the future anyway. You know, everyone's going to have a handheld device, which of course wasn't the case back then. It is today. Again, an accolade to his remarkable understanding of technologies and where they're going. And then subsequently they became X.com with Elon Musk, and then subsequently PayPal, which was the first time money was successfully digitized in any meaningful manner. There was attempts to do that beforehand with Digibyte. You had eGold. Often these didn't end very well. However, Thiel successfully created the formula along with the individuals of the PayPal mafia that went on to essentially found the biggest tech companies of today and change the world. The interesting thing with Thiel's involvement perhaps in crypto is we know that he has funded many projects. Mm-hmm. He gave Vitalik Buterin, I think, $100,000 in a grant back in 2014, and then he subsequently went on to found Ethereum. He was also one of the first investors in OpenCoin, which subsequently then became Ripple in 2013.
Right.
So to kind of summarize what I'm getting at here, Thiel and the PayPal mafia are unbelievably influential individuals, so much so that one of them is now the AI and crypto czar. Mm-hmm. Thiel is an unbelievable visionary when it comes to technologies. It's crazy to believe that he perhaps hasn't seen this one coming. In fact, potentially may be behind it, just publicly. And he has direct involvement with Ripple, which he was one of the early investors in with Anderson and Horowitz, Google Ventures, and I think Lightspeed Ventures.
Yeah.
So that, for me, his involvement, and you've got to think, 2013, what was the crypto space like in 2013?
Interesting.
Yeah, to say that, I mean, it was chaos, right? Nobody took it seriously. Bitcoin, I think, in 2013 started off at about $13. By the end of that year, it subsequently went to 1,000. Maybe Silk Road was the reasoning behind that, and that saga's kind of come to an end with the freeing of, or the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht. Really what I'm getting at here is just how much of an amazing tech investor Thiel is, how much of a visionary he is, and the fact that he's essentially backing and giving his stamp of approval to Ripple back in 2013. And today, to kind of draw on things that we've just spoken about, it seems in that prime position to fundamentally change money once again, which is what he's previously done with the likes of PayPal.
Do you think there's any broader implications around this from a stance of where Palantir's thesis is, which is, you know, mostly surveillance? Obviously, they're a company that is really working on that. What is that? I think it's the total information or total awareness program. And you look at that along with what's happening right now with cross-border settlement payments now potentially. And I think this is much bigger because many people, even Gardening House, has been on record saying, "Hey, we think we're going to get 10 to 20% of Swift settlement." I think this is more likely to see an immediate impact on Swift settlement, maybe upwards of 60 to 70%.
Well,
If that were to happen, we're talking about a revamping of the global finance system and the interconnectivity of the global world banks. So, with the global world banks behind that, you've got to be able to understand, I would say, almost every major infrastructure from a geopolitical standpoint. Well, there's only one company that's capable of really kind of going in that direction. That's Palantir.
yep.
So, and what their direction is. So, I guess I'm a little fearful of where maybe Thiel is heading, but I'm also looking at, well, maybe there's all sorts of unique theories out there, but his connection to both finance, information, and what we're seeing now on the technology front, and now especially with AI, which will play a big role in this. I guess the question is this connection good or bad for not only Ripple, but for crypto in general?
I think Thiel is a controversial guy. Correctly, he's a controversial guy. Some of the things he says, he claims to be a libertarian whilst
Yep.
enabling things that perhaps fly in the face of that. That is very,
Yep.
it doesn't quite make sense. I think, interestingly, crypto doesn't just have purely positive ramifications for the
Yep.
world. It's going to fundamentally change the world in a big way. From an investment point of view, I think there's a great opportunity there. There's going to be massive winners from it, like the developing world, perhaps, that is going to be brought into this kind of global system. But the problem with a global system is if one person has control over it, and Thiel has actually spoken about this as an issue, you kind of end up in a kind of totalitarian world
Yeah. Yeah.
that crypto might play a role in. And actually,
Yeah.
Chris Larson, always go and look at what these guys said in the early days. One thing that Chris Larson spoke about was that the fixing of money through distributed ledgers would ultimately lead to the final piece of the globalization puzzle being finalized. You need elements when it comes to globalization. One reason it hasn't worked thus far is because of money.
Yeah.
Crypto is fixing that. Palantir is potentially working on this kind of global information or surveillance highway. I think there's a lot of interconnections here in regards to a push towards a more global world. Potentially dollarization is also a major part of that. So in regards to Palantir specifically, will they use and utilize crypto in the future? Potentially. We know that social medias are certainly doing that. Look at what Elon Musk's trying to do with X and X.com. That original vision that they had is now coming to fruition. What cryptos they use, well, there's probably some more obvious ones than not. But I don't know if I can draw some direct links between Palantir, but what I can draw is the fact that crypto is certainly moving us towards what seems obvious, and that is a more kind of globalized state. And whether that's ultimately a good or a bad thing is for you guys to decide.
Well, and I think, the key will be, and here's the unique thing that maybe is the bastion of hope here. If you think about we'll call it the Bitcoiners or the Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin community. Listen, I own Bitcoin. It's an asset that I would always see as a potential. I also own some Ethereum, but I believe where XRP is heading is next level. And you look at what happened at the Bitcoin conference last year, the one prior to this year, where Vance came out. But last year it was Trump while he was campaigning, and he was personally, I feel, and I still am not sure. I've watched that clip I don't know how many times because I watched body language and just the whole concept of how he responded when that community reacted to him getting rid of Gensler. Okay. And the idea of firing Gensler and his true, I believe, surprise that this was a big deal. And at that time, I think maybe that was when there was two times when I think Trump changed his tune. It was on that day. And of course, the other day was when he was shot at. Yep. So he was in a position where he realized something much bigger than probably even he thought could happen. And then I think he tapped into something that became and got him to the presidency. Many people would point at Musk or maybe even Sachs to a certain extent. But Sachs is a huge, Solana fan. He's a big crypto guy. And then of course, obviously, the Sachs connection to Peter Thiel,
Yep.
and his connection to Ripple. All of this seems to be going in the right direction. So my point I'm getting at is that even though there could be a problem, I feel like Trump, and even to a certain extent, maybe JD Vance, and we'll see what that looks like, if Rubio is going to be his running mate for the next cycle or not. But I think these guys realize this community can move very quickly, and literally, it's the true situation that we're dealing with here in the United States. And that is, fortunately, we still have our defense mechanisms, and we can actually revolt against things. And I think that's what the crypto community did. They revolted against banking, the structure, and it worked. And I think now you're seeing the powers that be realize that. So it's interesting to see whether they'll cross the line of control. Now, I have one more clip I want to play, and I want to get your attention or your opinion on this. This was Hester Peirce. We had Hester on a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to play this clip for you guys because this is very interesting. And basically, what it's about is the SEC wants to open crypto to retail. And I tweeted this out, and I think a lot of people got my communication wrong. I wasn't talking about retail investment. Let me play this clip for you so you guys can understand a little bit.
Let's talk a little bit about that EO. So it instructs the Department of Labor and the SEC to adjust their rules and regulations to allow those retirement accounts to invest in private assets, to invest in crypto, or at least to allow it. How will the SEC approach this? What does that checklist look like?
Katie, it's great to be here. I think we've already started that process of opening the private markets to retail and thinking about ways that we can get them access in a way that's diversified, professionally managed, and consistent with their investing timeframes. And so I think we'll just continue with that work.
Appreciate that context. So as we continue on and as you approach this, talk us through some of the potential risks that you're thinking about, because certainly a lot of folks on Wall Street and elsewhere have been anticipating these rule changes, but there's also a lot of concern, too, about putting what are risky assets in retirement accounts.
Yes, I mean, I think those are legitimate concerns. What we've seen, of course, is that the public markets are dominated by several large companies, and also companies are waiting longer to go public. And so we're looking for a way for retail to get earlier access to the growth of companies. And so that's really the goal of it.
Let's talk.
All right. So retail to get earlier access to these growth companies. And you look at the winners of who that's going to be going into a lot of these potential 401ks. Obviously, this will roll into ETFs, which are more structured capital. XRP is in the right place at the right time. Do you think that, and this is something that Steven said from Canary Capital, is that this next move for XRP, especially around ETFs and now 401ks, potentially seeing Ripple as a next generation company, do you think this will start to separate the pack for XRP and its longtime holders?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ramifications of the ETFs, the 401ks, being able to actually access these investments is going to really change the course that XRP is on, because what that's going to do is unlock a hell of a lot of liquidity that's going to be able to flow into it. You talk about 401ks, you're talking about, I think, $7-8 trillion, $9 trillion, something like that. You talk about traditional investors that like to invest in traditional assets. Mm-hmm. They're still largely siloed from the cryptocurrency space.
Exactly.
Once that unlock takes place, I mean, you're talking of trillions upon trillions of dollars that I'm not saying are going to flow into XRP, but could. And that could is a big thing. If you look at what we've seen with Bitcoin and its ETF, the most successful ETF in history, Ethereum actually isn't that far behind. I think it's third in regards to the fastest ETF to get to $10 billion. I actually think XRP is going to surprise everybody, because I think people know what's going on with it from an institutional point of view. Yep. It can't just be us on the peripheries that understand this. It has to be sort of the people that this technology is going to affect. They have to have looked into it. It would be bad due diligence not to. Once you see that ETF approval, which I think is going to come in September, I think everything points to that, including some of the conversations I've had with ETP providers. I think you're going to see miraculous things, and I think that's going to set us up for a pretty explosive back end of 2025 and beyond. I think crypto goes on more of a broad trajectory than just following the kind of mundane 4-year cycles. As a result of everything going on, there's always a danger by saying this time is different, but everything points to this time being different. And I think XRP, what's really going to separate it from the pack, talking about the rest of the cryptocurrency market, is it doing what it was designed to. And that is to become a sort of global bridge currency.
Yeah.
Because the sky's the limits for XRP. If you think about assets, people always say that XRP can't get to these kind of valuations due to market cap. Market cap is really irrelevant. People are comparing XRP as an asset to the likes of perhaps the stock market. The largest stock that we have today is Microsoft. I think today it's about $3.9 trillion. People couldn't imagine back in the 1980s that we could get to a $3.9 trillion stock when the largest stock in the 1980s was IBM at $39 billion. That's 100x today. So in terms of valuations for XRP in the future, we really have no idea what money, well, we've got an idea of the fact that money under this system is going to continue to proliferate, meaning things will get bigger in terms of monetary terms. But we have no idea just what the real world implementation of this technology is going to do for demand when you have all the other demand catalysts, perhaps more so with XRP strategy companies that are going to form. You know, the sky really is the limit. And what we're seeing is an asset class, not just for XRP, actually being enabled to be one. Crypto has literally not been enabled to be an asset class up until this point.
No.